So welcome to the basic civil and mechanical engineering course, and the course code is BE8252 for the regulation 2017. So in this video session, we'll be studying about the fourth unit, internal combustion engines and power plants, that is the main components of the internal combustion engines. So coming to the main components of internal combustion engines, this is a reference book, and this is the course outcomes after completion of the basic civil and mechanical engineering course. And these are all the main components of IC engines. We have the figure here, and here from the figure, right from the top, you have the inlet valve and the exhaust valve, and you have that inlet port and exhaust port, and you have the cylinder head. So all these valves and this port are present in the cylinder head, and you have a cooling system, cooling fins around this cylinder head, and you have the cylinder. This is a cylinder in which you have the piston which moves up and down, and this piston and the crank shaft is connected by means of this connecting rod. So wrist pin is used to connect the piston and the cylinder at the top, and a crank pin is used to connect this bottom part of the connecting rod with the top of the crankshaft. It is connected to a crank. So this is a piston. So these are all the main components of an IC engines, and here it is air-cooled IC engines. This figure shows a air-cooled IC engines. So cylinder block. So cylinder block is nothing but it is the main block of the engine. It contains cylinder, and it is accurately finished, which accommodate the piston. And this cylinder block houses crank, crankshaft, piston, and other engine parts. And normally in water-cooled engines, the cylinder block is provided with water jackets for circulating cooling water, whereas in air-cooled engines you have this cooling fins. So the materials used for the cylinder are mostly made of cast iron, aluminum alloys, etc., and usually made of a single casting material. So this is the cylinder block for a motorcycle, and this is a cylinder block of a car. So this is a cylinder block. So next is the cylinder head. You can see from this figure, the cylinder head is normally bolted to the cylinder block by means of studs, and you have water jackets provided for cooling water circulation. And here the materials normally used for a cylinder head are cast iron, aluminum alloy, etc., and mostly generally it's made of a single cast iron. So cylinder liners. So the liners is a sleeve. The cylinder liners are nothing but it is a sleeve fitted into the cylinder bore, and which provides a wear resistance surface for the cylinder bore. So you have normally two types of liners, wet liner and dry liners. And here this is the wet liners, and these liners are surrounded or wetted by cooling water, and so it is called as wet liner. It provides wear resisting surfaces for the piston to reciprocate inside, and it also acts as a seal for the water jacket. So dry liner. So dry liners have metal to metal contact with the cylinder block, and they do not directly will be in touch with the cooling water. So normally the lining materials, the liner materials withstand abrasive wear and corrosive, and the chromium plated mild steel tubes are used as liners. And this is a crankcase. This is a crankcase. It may be a cast integral with the cylinder block. Sometimes it is cast separately and then attached to the cylinder block. And these materials are used for crankcase or cast iron, aluminum alloy, or alloy steels. And the last one is the oil pan. So oil pan or oil sump. Normally this is the bottom part of the engine. So this oil pan or the oil sump will have this lubricating oil, and it has a drain plug at the bottom in order to drain out the oil. And the material is it is made usually of a pressed sheet. And the piston. So the piston, which moves inside the cylinder, it acts as a movable gas-tight seal to keep the gases inside the cylinder, and also it transmits a force of explosion in the cylinder to the crankshaft through the connecting rod. So you have this piston crown at the top, and you have a top compression rings and the second compression rings, and the third rings is the oil ring, and you have a wrist pin snap ring which is used to connect the top end of the connecting rod with this piston, and you have this connecting rod shaft, and you have a connecting rod cap, connecting rod bolts, and the bearings, which in this the big end of the connecting rod is connected to the crankshaft. Some of the materials used here for pistons are normally cast iron, aluminum alloy, chromium nickel alloy, nickel iron alloy, and cast steel. So piston rings. So normally piston rings are inserted in the groove provided in the piston. So you have two types of piston, compression rings and oil rings or oil control rings. And compression rings normally provide an effective seal for the high pressure gases inside the cylinder. So to prevent the escape of pressure gases from the cylinder, these compression rings are very useful. And they prevent leakage of pressure gases from the combustion chamber into the crankcase. And normally each piston will be provided with two compression rings. And oil rings which wipe off the excess oil from the cylinder walls, and it also returns excess oil to the oil sump through the slots provided in the ring. And here the materials should be of wear resistance, and normally the materials are alloy steel, iron containing silicon, manganese alloy steels, etc. So the next is the connecting rod. So normally the connecting rod, it connects the piston and the crankshaft. So this connecting rod transmits the force of explosion during power stroke to the crankshaft. So the connecting rod has bearing at both ends. We saw in the previous figure. So connecting rod has bearings at both ends. And the small end of the connecting rod has a solid or split eye and contains a bush. This end is connected to the piston by means of a gudgeon pin. And the other end, that is called the big end of the connecting rod, in order to withstand heavy thrust, it should have strength and rigidity. And they are mostly made of drop forge eye sections. And the materials used here are plain carbon steel, nickel alloy steels, and aluminum alloy. So next is the crankshaft, and it is a main rotating shaft of the engine, and power is obtained from the crankshaft. This crankshaft is a combination with the connecting rod that converts reciprocity motion of the piston into rotary motion. So that we have seen in the animation in the previous slide. The crankshaft is held in position by the main bearing, and you have two main bearings to support the crankshaft. Normally the materials used are billet steel, carbon steel, nickel, chrome, and other heat treated alloy steels. So next is the camshaft, and the camshaft normally contains a number of cams, and this is also used to convert the rotary motion into linear motion or straight line motion. And it has so many cams depending on the number of valves in an engine. And there is an additional cam which also provided to drive the fuel pump. And you have gears in the camshaft to drive the distributor or oil pump. And See, the closing and the opening of the engine valves are most normally controlled by these cams, which are provided on the camshaft. So with this, we come to an end with this components of IC engines. So